Here's a trick question. When was the last time you used an app without maps? Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, Glovo, and countless other apps use some kind of a mapping feature to show location of yourself, give you directions, or help you understand the world around you. And so in today's comprehensive no-code tutorial, you're going to learn how to leverage maps in your apps. We're going to be covering simple use cases, and we're going to be slowly moving towards more complex ones and covering everything in between. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources that I discuss on this channel can be viewed and or cloned via our amazing Patreon community. And if you're still not a member, then you're greatly missing out. Check it out using the first link in the description below the video. Now, the first thing that I want to show you is how to set up and configure your maps. Okay, so as you can see, I have here a map widget. This is actually Google Maps, and we are centered on New York City here. And I also have some markers here on various points, on various landmarks. Now, what's cool about this here is that I can zoom out, I can zoom in, I can drag and drop, I can go pretty much anywhere I want. It's a very, very flexible map widget. You can also do a lot of other things, as we're going to be covering a little bit later in the video. And so if I jump back into my builder, this is the widget here. Now, if you click over here and you search for maps, you're going to actually see a couple of widgets. So you have this Google Maps, or Google Map as the case may be here. And you also have this static map. Now, I just recommend using Google Maps. It's, one of the most popular products out there. Everybody knows. It's very, very powerful. You can do a lot of amazing things with it, as you're going to be seeing a little bit later in the video. So if you select this here, you're going to have this widget here that you can configure. Now, before you start to configure this widget, there's one important thing that you need to do. And if you choose maps here and you go into app settings, Google Maps, you need to enter your API key. Okay, and so where do you get this API key? Well, if you go over to Google Cloud, and assuming you already have a project created, right? Because if you're using Google Cloud, everything works in terms of projects, right? You arrange your APIs, you arrange your resources in terms of projects, right? So as you can see, I have a project here selected. I actually have several projects, but this is the project that I'm using right now. And so what you want to do is you want to go into API services right here, and then you want to go into library, right? And then you want to find maps. So as you can see, I have maps SDK for Android. Here I have for iOS, and here I have a JavaScript API. And so you want to make sure all of these are turned on and enabled. As you can see, it says here API enabled, manage. If you do not have this enabled, you're going to see a button that says something like enable that you need to click on, and now it's enabled. And so I have all of these enabled because, if you're going to be building an app, assuming it's going to be cross-platform for iOS, Android, as well as maybe the web, you want to make sure that it works on all of these platforms. And the next thing that you want to do is you want to go into credentials here, okay? And this is where you can create your API keys that your apps are going to be using. And as you can see, I already have my keys. Now, if you do not have your keys yet, you can just click on create credentials, and you want to click on this API key. Okay, I'm not going to do that because I already have my keys here. And once you do that, you're going to have a new key. You can simply click on show key, and now you have this key. You just want to copy this, and then you want to jump back into your FlutterFlow app builder and paste the key in all of these fields. Now, the next thing that you want to do is you want to configure your widget. Now, when you are viewing your widget inside of this app builder, you're going to be seeing this message. You can ignore this message. You're only going to be seeing this message in the app builder. You're not going to be seeing this message when your app is running. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to insert this widget. Click here, and on the right hand side you can configure various things. So things like the number of markers, and here you can select none, single, or multiple. You can also select a marker type, and this is going to be either a document or lat long. Now, a document means a Firebase Firestore document. Okay, if you're not going to be using Firestore as your backend, you want to be selecting lat long. And pretty much in most cases, you just want to work with lat longs directly, unless you're building an app that uses, Firestore as the backend. In that case, in your document, you're going to have a lat long field, which is what this setting is going to be working with, okay? But we're going to be using lat long here. And here we have our initial markers, right? So this is actually a list of lat longs that I have configured in my app state so that we can show a list of initial markers here. And then you have a bunch of other settings. So like a marker icon, you can select an image, you can do default. Marker color here, you can select the color. The map type, we're just using this default roadmap. Map style, standard, etc., etc. And here you can specify the initial map center. And right here, we're using coordinates for NYC. So depending on what you're building your app for, you may want to center your map at a specific point, okay? You can also do an initial map zoom, and you also have a bunch of other settings. I did not touch these. I just left them on default. You may have to, tweak them depending on, what kind of app that you're building and what kind of options you want your users to take advantage. Okay. So once you set this up, you're going to be seeing this right here. Now, this by itself doesn't really give you anything. It's a static map. It doesn't really provide any kind of a user experience. You have static points. I mean, it could be useful in situations where you just want to, display a bunch of points for the user and leave it at that. But the next thing that I want to show you is a new feature that you can implement for your map-based apps. And this is a feature that allows the user to type in an address and have the system automatically find the address. So let's say I want to find this museum of ice cream right here. Well, if I type museum, I will start having these autocompletes, okay? So as you can see, I have Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. I have Museum of the American Indian, Museum of Ice Cream right here. And if I keep typing, I'm going to narrow down my choices. And right here, I can just select it, and that's it. And now I have a fully auto-completed field, okay? I can do something else. Let's say I'm looking for this color factory, right? I type color, I start typing factory, and I see my options, right? We have this color factory in New York, color factory in Chicago, color factory in Houston, Texas. Okay, so I can select this color factory, and we have it right there. So this is a great feature that you probably are going to be using 99% of the time. Okay, this is an amazing feature because it lets the user search for something and have it create autocomplete. Now, how exactly is this accomplished? Well, if we jump to the second page here, we have this input address here, and I'm actually using this feature in my latest complex app, which you can see a link right there. And so this thing here, right, if we select this input address, go into actions right here, we can open this up, and here we only have one action, and this is where we are setting page state. Okay, we want to know what the user is typing, and as the user changes what they're typing, whether they're trying to finish something or they go back, they want to change something, we need to set a page state. That essentially sets the scene for what we're about to do next. And what exactly are we going to do next? Well, if you notice here, this input address has a backend, meaning that it's getting data somewhere. And if you hover over, you're going to see that this is an API call, okay, meaning that this input address is pulling data via an API call, and it has access to that data that it's pulling. And only this, this widget here has access to the data. And what exactly are we doing? Well, if you click here, you're going to see that we have two API calls, but the one in question, the one that we're talking about right now, is this one right here, get address, okay? And this is an API that's actually part of the Google autocomplete library, okay? This is actually part of the Google Places API, right? So if you come over here, you can actually search for Places API, and you're going to find it right here. So this is this new Places API. And if you click over here, you can kind of learn more about it. Okay, so here it says next generation of the Places API with access to more than 200 million places. And if you click on the documentation, you can kind of learn more about it, right? So if you click documentation, here we have this Places API, and depending on for what platform that you're building it, you can click here. So for instance, let's say you're doing just a raw API as what we're doing right now. You can simply click here, and you're going to have full documentation, okay, for this Places API. And this is a very, very powerful API because it allows you to find an actual place just by typing it, right? Because a place is a lot more complex than, just typing it, right? You have the city, you have the state, you have the street, you also have the coordinates, you have lots and lots of information. And this API helps you get there, right? And so if we jump back to our app builder here, right? What we have here is we have a bunch of query parameters, right? We have the language that is fixed, which is English US. We have the key, which is also fixed. And here we have the input, which is going to be dynamic. And that is why we have it set from a variable. And so if we do response and test, you can enter an input. So let's say I put 35 Collins Avenue, which is a street in Miami Beach, and I do test API, you're going to be getting a bunch of prediction, which are another word for results, right? Search results. And so here we have 35 Collins Avenue, Spring Valley, New York. Here we have another Collins Avenue in Baltimore. Here we have another in Port Monmouth, New Jersey. We have lots and lots of Collins Avenue. And so depending on, which one we're looking for, we can display these choices and options to the user and have them select what they're looking for. And along with this result here, there's lots of metadata, lots of data behind the scenes. And so we have things like, Collins Avenue, right? The street, we have the city, we have the state, we have the country, etc., etc. And one of the most important things that we have here is the place ID or the reference. And this here is a specific ID that you can get even more information using a different API. And so if we jump back in here, you can see that we are feeding it via an API. And if we come over here, you can see that we have this get address. And if we edit it, the input is simply this input right here. And so as the user is typing, we're changing our page state. And once we change the page state, remember with state, you can automatically rebuild the page, and that automatically refetches that API call. It restarts that API call, and we get new data. And as a result, we have this really nice flow. And so if I type Collins Avenue here, you're going to see these results, right? Spring Valley, Baltimore, New Jersey, Bloomfield. Let's say I'm looking for Baltimore. I can simply click here, and we are displaying this field here as the result. So a very, very powerful feature that is provided to you thanks to Google's Places API, okay? But by itself, it doesn't really do anything, right? I mean, it lets the user select the address, the place, the city, anything that they're looking for. But that's about it, right? We need to do more, okay? And so in this next example, we're going to be getting the exact coordinates from the address that the user has filled in as the result of using that autocomplete. Now, let's say I'm looking to do something in Miami. So let's say I start typing Miami Beach here, and here I see the first result, Miami Beach. So if I click it, I automatically get redirected. The map is automatically centered in Miami Beach. But not only that, we also get the all-important coordinates here, right? Because coordinates are the key. If you do not have the coordinates, you really cannot find the place. It's all about the coordinates. And so as a result, thanks to these coordinates, we know where to center the map. And that is this point right here in Miami Beach. And so I can type something else. Let's say I am, looking for information about Los Angeles. Here we have Los Angeles International Airport. I select it, and we are automatically redirected to Los Angeles International Airport thanks to these coordinates that we were able to automatically look up from what the user typed in here. So if I type, let's say Hawaii, let's say I type Hawaii, Hawaii, USA, selected, and we're somewhere in Hawaii. Okay, so if I zoom out, we should be somewhere on the tropical island of Hawaii. And as you can see, these are the Hawaiian Islands right here, and Hawaii happens to have this coordinate here. And so not only are we showing these autocomplete, but we're also doing the most important thing that we need to do, and that is to get the coordinates so that we can work with the map. And how exactly is this done? Well, if we jump back to our builder right here, we have the same thing. We have this input address here, but now we have an extra step. And so with the field selected, if I come over here and I open the action flow editor, we are doing a couple of other things. So we have this onChange event, and this is when the user is typing stuff. And instead of doing this call as part of the widget, as was the case previously, we are now doing it on the onChange event. And the reason we need to do it as part of this flow is something that you're going to see in just a second. So right here, we are doing this API call right inside the action flow. We are seeing what's happening here. Now, if we have succeeded and we have gotten the data, we need to save the addresses that we are getting. So the user is seeing the addresses as part of the autocomplete, but we need to save this information in the backend. But not only that, we also need to save the all-important place IDs. And why do we need to save the addresses and the place IDs? Well, you're going to see this right here, because if you go into focus change, this is where a lot of the magic happens. Okay, so in focus change, meaning that when the field loses focus, because when we clicked on one of the autocomplete options, once we click, the field loses focus. At this point, this API is called, and this is where we need to look up the coordinates after the user selected their choice. So after the user picked the address that they're looking for, we need to look up the coordinates. And so what we're doing here is we have a second API call to this get reference. Okay, and I'm going to show you this call in just a second. And because we've saved the addresses before and we've saved the place IDs as a result of the previous call, we can send that chosen address and get the ID, the index in that list of the data, right? Because we're getting a lot of data, but we're only displaying the actual address. We're not displaying the reference ID, and that is why we need to save it. And based on what the user chose, we need to look up that reference ID, that all-important place ID. And this is exactly what we're doing, right? We're looking up the index here, and we have this custom code expression that gets us back the index, right? We have the list of addresses. We have the address that they selected, and we're using this function called indexOf to get us the index, right? And once we have the index, we can simply pass it to the place IDs, and we'll be able to get the place ID. And this is exactly what we're doing here. We're essentially sending in that place to that second API call, and we are going to be getting this place ID. Now, we're not done just yet. We also need to get the coordinates, right? So when we send that place ID, we get back the coordinates, and we have another custom function that essentially creates a lat-long object, which is the object that contains the coordinates, right? We can't be passing around just two numbers around, two doubles around, which is what coordinates are. We need to create this object, and we have this custom function that all we are doing is we are passing a lat long, and it returns this all important lat long object here. And where are we getting these lat longs? Well, we're getting it from this API call. So we have this JSON body, we have a predefined path, lat, and we also have a predefined path long. And so if I jump back to this API, we have the second API call, and here it's expecting a place ID, right? So I have a sample place ID here. If I do a test API call, we are getting some information, right? So this is actually a city in Spain, right? As you can see right here. And we're getting all of this information, but most importantly, we're getting this lat long here, okay? And this is exactly what we need, because a place, an address, it doesn't really mean much to us in the context of maps without the latitude and longitude, right? So if I scroll down, I have these JSON paths that capture a lat and a long. And so once we have a lat and a long, I have that custom function that returns a object that, is used all over the place in FlutterFlow, right? FlutterFlow expects that long. So if we jump back here and you come over here, we need this lat long because we use it as a location, right? So if you jump back here, open this up, on focus change, we are setting this location because the objective here is to have the user enter an address, and we need to center the map on that location. And we also need to display it here for debugging purposes, just to see if it's working. And that is exactly what's happening, right? If I type an address, let's say I type Spain as an example here, and I select Spain, it's going to get the lat long, and it's going to center it somewhere in Spain, probably in Madrid somewhere, if I had to guess, right? So if we zoom out, and here you see Madrid, and we can keep zooming out, and you're going to see a map of Spain right here. And all of this here is thanks to the second API call, get reference, and this flow right here. Now, this is great and all, but wouldn't it be cool to have the ability to enter a bunch of addresses and have their exact locations show up on the map? And so here I have a map of Manhattan. And let's say I am looking for more information about Chelsea Market right here, right? So I'm going to type Chelsea Market, and I'm going to select it. And now we have a marker right where Chelsea Market is, okay? Let's say I'm also interested in visiting the Empire State Building. I'm going to type Empire here. I'm going to type Empire State Building. I'm going to select it, and now we have a marker on Empire State Building. And last but not least, I also want to check out the Tenement Museum. Okay, so I've been thinking for a while of checking it out. So I'm going to type Tenement, and here I have Tenement Museum, and now I have a marker. Okay, so now I've entered 3 locations, and I'm seeing a map, and I have this map with the markers set in those 3 locations. So how is this done? Well, if we jump back to our app builder, go into this 4th demo here, we have these 3 fields that do pretty much the same thing as in the previous demo. So if we click on one of these fields, open it up, we have onChange and onFocusChange. And remember, onChange is responsible for autocomplete. OnFocusChange is responsible for what happens when you select it, for things afterwards, for the actual magic. And so here we have this onChange. It's pretty much the same thing. We are connecting to this API. We're updating. We're getting the addresses. We're getting the place ID. And most importantly, I forgot to mention it, is that we're actually displaying the data. So with this field selected here, we have this autocomplete enabled, and for the autocomplete properties, we are displaying the addresses that we're getting from the API call. So I know many of you are going to be wondering how we have it set up, and we're simply displaying the addresses that are stored in the app state that we save it there after the API call. So we save it in the app state, and then we're displaying it here, okay? And so it's the exact same thing as before, but the real magic happens in the second flow, right? So if we go into focus change here, what we're doing here is we're doing the second API call where we are sending in the address that the user picked, getting the ID, and then looking up the place ID based on that index. And here, what we're doing is we're setting the location as before, but we're also doing a couple of other things. We are adding this new location to this markers list, and this is actually an app state variable. And so if you jump over to app state, you can see that we have these markers here, right? We have these markers that store the markers that we want to display on the map. And if we jump to our map over here, you can see that we are displaying the markers here, right? These are the markers that are going to be shown when the page loads, when the app loads. They may not be, markers, initial markers set. And as a result, you're not seeing any markers because this list is empty. But as the user is typing things, we have that onChange, and then we have the onFocusChange. And in the onFocusChange, we're adding that newly looked up address, those coordinates. in this list of markers here. And that is why you're seeing these new markers automatically show up on this map right here. So this is the kind of flow that you can use when it comes to actually showing the markers as the user is looking something up, or they're, making a list of places to visit, etc., etc. This is something that you can do right here. Now, the stuff that I've shown you so far is very, very actionable, right? You can take the things that I talked about and start to implement these features, these flows, these functionalities in your own apps, because after all, many of the consumer apps that we're going to be building is going to be using maps one way or another. And so you can definitely put some of these features and functionalities to use. But in this next demo, I want to show you something really, really cool that you can do in your apps if you're looking to do something like real-time user tracking, real-time order tracking, etc., etc. You're going to find this very, very helpful. And to show you this functionality, I'm actually going to download this app right here on my computer and run it in a simulator, because after all, that is exactly what your apps are going to be running. They're either going to be running in a simulator or in a real device. Okay, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click here and I'm going to copy this thing right here. Then I'm going to jump into my terminal and paste this command. And what's that going to do? It's going to download this entire app code base and save it on my computer. So I already did that. Next, I'm going to click here and I'm going to launch one of my simulators. Here it's launching right now. Next, I'm going to go over here and run my app, and I'm going to wait for my app to load. And now I have my app up and running in a real Android simulator. So we still have all of these things, but if I click on this fifth demo, I want to show you something really, really cool. So what's happening here is we have 2 points here, right? We have the point here and we have the point here, and it's emulating the movement of a courier from this point to this point. And here we have time left and we're showing distance left, which are actual real-time calculations. Okay, so this is how long it's going to take to cover this distance, right? So from Midtown Manhattan to Upper West Side. And as you can see, we also have the path. This is thanks to Google's Directions API. And we have this marker here that kind of resembles a car moving along this path. So as you can see, now it says 20 minutes, distance left 2.9. Now it's 19 minutes, and it's going to be updating in real time as the simulation is working, as this point here is moving to its destination here. Now, how is this implemented? Well, if we jump back into FlutterFlow and we go into page 5, here I'm using a custom widget. So if you click here, I have here a custom widget called Custom Google Maps. And this custom widget is using this library here called Google Maps widget. Okay, and so you can simply Google for it. You can head over to pop.dev and you can search for this. But in a nutshell, this is a Flutter package which can be used to make polylines from a source to destination, and also handle a driver's real-time location on the map. So this is going to be very, very useful for all kinds of apps that need to show a movement of something to somewhere, right? So maybe a car to a destination, maybe a delivery person to a destination, etc., etc. And you can see some of the screenshots here, and this widget is completely customizable. Okay, so it gives you a callback option. Basically, it can spit out and notify you as the time is changing, right? You give it 2 coordinates and it's going to tell you the time. It's going to calculate the time, but not only that, it's also going to calculate the distance. But most importantly, it's going to give you a callback that you can use in your custom widgets or custom actions if you want, to notify your app as the data is changing, right? So I have this custom widget configured with a distance callback and a time callback, and these callbacks have a, one parameter, which is, in this case, this is a distance. In this case, this is a time. Both are just strings, just to make things simpler. And if I scroll down, I'm setting up my source lat long, my source coordinates, and my destination coordinates. Obviously, if you're building a production app, you're not going to be hard coding these. These are going to be passed as parameters. And if we scroll down here, I have a simulation that's simulating a point moving. But most importantly, we have these two callbacks, right? Total time callback takes in a time, and total distance callback takes in a distance. And we are calling these callbacks that I've defined on, in this, on this FlutterFlow level. And these callbacks will call our own callbacks as time or distance is changing. And so what's cool about it, now I can select this widget, scroll down, and I have these distance callbacks and time callbacks. So if you open it up, the only thing that we're doing is we're updating a page state variable with the new value that we were sent, that we were notified with. So here we are updating our distance, and here we are updating our time, and we're setting our time, and then we're displaying time here and a distance here. And as a result, you have this kind of really cool flow. So now time left is only 13 minutes. Remember, it was like 20 or 25 minutes before. Distance left is 2 miles, and it's moving along the path. And so this delivery person is in Upper West Side already. They're almost there, 13 minutes away, 2 miles away. They're going to be arriving soon. And this is done thanks to these callbacks and page state variables here as well. And so this demo here showcases functionality that you can use in more real-time apps, in apps where you need to show real-time location in the context of a source and a destination. So somebody that's, delivering something from a restaurant to your house, or maybe you hailed a taxi, a cab, or like an Uber, or like an Lyft, or something like that, and you're seeing it moving to your destination, right? This is going to be perfect for that. Now, I've talked about lots and lots of things in today's video, but really the best way to learn is by having access to this app right here, basically by viewing and or cloning this app. And you'll be able to do just that when you join our amazing, rapidly growing Patreon community. Because when you join our amazing community, you're going to get access to not only this app, you're going to get access to all the apps, which means you can view and or clone all my apps. You're also going to get access to some extra content, things such as Q&As, behind the scenes, our Patreon supported masterclass. And in fact, I'm going to be doing another masterclass shortly. And for those who are not aware, a Patreon masterclass is a deep dive tutorial that I do from time to time on topics that our audience votes on. And so if you're interested in getting access to comprehensive no-code tutorials that are not going to be available on the YouTube channel, you're going to find them inside of our Patreon community. And above all that, when you join our amazing Patreon community, you're going to be supporting this channel and supporting my work, and that is greatly appreciated. And so if you want to clone this app, if you want to clone any of the other apps, if you've gotten value on this channel, if you want more value, then you should definitely check out the first link in the description below and join our amazing, rapidly growing Patreon community.